So in session C, video 4, we're going to look at another edge in sports betting. In video 1, we looked at each way betting. In video 2, pricing up markets ourselves. In video 3, steamers. This video, we're going to look at biased markets. So biased markets are the opportunity for us to go and do some legwork and find out if we can find a betting market where there is so much bias on one side or with one particular selection in that market that it actually becomes a positive equity bet for us in the long run. If I flick over to Excel quickly, I want to give an example. Now, this is a boost that is at Sky Bet. Now, whilst boosts are fairly evidently, well, most of them are positive expectations. Some of them are actually, they look like they're positive expectation, but they're not. They're not exactly a long-term methodology or strategy for profiting from a bookmaker, because if you go to a bookmaker and you take too many of these and not enough standard market bets, the bookmaker is going to apply restrictions and limits and stop you from betting. And so unless you have infinite ability to attain new accounts at a bookmaker, this isn't really a strategy for profiting in the long term. It is a strategy for profiting in the short term only. However, that doesn't mean that it doesn't provide alternative opportunity for us to find value. This particular bet is a double up boost, Mitrovic and Kane, 1+ shot on target each, was 1-2, now even money. Shots on target, quite popular bets with the bookmaker. I think they're paid out via Opta, so Opta decide if something was a shot on target, and sometimes it's very clear. The shot has to sort of be aiming towards the goal. It has to go all the way through to the goalkeeper. Sometimes it gets a little bit subjective when people wonder, was it a cross? You know, if it came straight from a corner, it could be argued not to be a shot. It was a pass. And I think that's when you sometimes see people up in arms in social media. But regardless, here we have Mitrovic and Kane to have 1+ shot on target each. Sometimes Sky Bet go even further than this, and they will say on a Saturday at 3 p.m, if Liverpool is playing especially, they'll say Salah was 1-10 to have a shot on target, now evens, boosting it from something seemingly certain to even money. And you'll get £10 maximum at even, so you can barely, profit enough. It's hardly even worth the risk it does to having your account restricted. But where we may be able to find value is on a biased market. There are exchanges where arbitrage players will place these bets and look to hedge their money because, God forbid, they understand the dynamics of letting something run and the fact that it's exactly the same equity if you let something run than if you hedge it. Actually, if you're paying commission on your hedges, it's more profitable to understand bankroll management and variance and let things run than it is to be laying everything. But regardless, you have a lot of people out there who don't like taking any risk and just want to lock their money in. And so this bet may be available on Matchbook because it's a special, and it may be 1.9, 1.92 on to lay. Now, does that mean that the fair odds of this is 1.9, 1.92? In order to work that out, we need to look at a couple of things. First of all, is there any reason for this market to be biased? By biased, I mean, are there more layers than backers in this market? And the same works in the opposite way. Are there more backers than layers in a market? If either of those statements are true, if it's not equal on both sides, then there's the opportunity for bias. What we need to do with Mitrovic and Kane 1+ shot on target each is we need to work out this bet ourselves and not use the exchange as a benchmarking source because we believe the exchange to be biased. We can use something like Bookie bashing, where in our tools we have various databases on shots on targets, 180s, player goals, match goals, where we are working out the fair odds of these ourselves, separated from the exchange, and therefore we can profit on the exchange because of that. There's a little bit more that comes into this particular bet. We have to work out some inclusivity. If Mitrovic gets a shot, does he take one away from Kane? You might argue he would be able to. You might argue that he wouldn't. But just because they have this blurb here, Mitrovic is the third, don't bother reading this, because Sky Bet are trying to prove that this is a good bet. And do you know what? It might be a bad bet. I've seen bets like this where a double up boost where the fair odds were 2.2. So it is actually really important to go out and work out what the odds are of this ourselves using our own data and our own calculators, and then seeing if there is enough value in this to provide liquidity to the layers on the exchange. Similarly, and the opposite of this might be where there are more backers than layers. So I know in the first goal scorer scorecast on the exchange, a lot of those bets, they're just being laid. There is no back available. Sorry, there is no lay available, so nobody's trying to trade a back at a high price. It's just the back that's available. And those guys that are laying those bets are pretty sharp. They seem to be, from what I've seen, laying mostly 200% EV bets for them. So you might be taking 15 on Salah to score first and the game to finish 2-1, and the real odds are like 30. So the guy that's laying at 15 is getting a good bet from you. Of course he is. So that's an example of a market where there's more backers than layers. Things like player to get a hat-trick, player to get 2+ goals are very similar like that. And so if we can model and work these out ourselves, we can actually find these biased markets. But the important thing is to separate ourselves from the bias, from the exchange numbers when we're working these out. There are other forms of biased market. Here are a few here. So the first one I'm going to look at is fave long shot bias. Here we have Rublev versus Djokovic, which was on this morning, and Djokovic kind of tore Rublev apart. Djokovic on the exchanges was 1.16 to back, 1.17 to lay. Rublev was 7 to back, 7.2 to lay. This is a perfect example of fave long shot bias in action. Here's the Pinnacle line. Pinnacle is meant to be a sharp bookmaker, and we see that the odds of Djokovic are pretty much between the back and the lay, whereas the odds 1.61, whereas the odds of Rublev are 5.9 at Pinnacle, 7 to back, 7.2 on the exchange. Same with Bet365, 1.16 at the bookmaker. Actually, that was 1.16 recurring, so a little bit of a higher price on Djokovic at Bet365 than on the actual exchange. That may even be a value bet for Djokovic on the at Bet365 there, because you're paying commission over the exchange here. It's arguable that 1.16 could be value, but only 5 on Rublev. Why is that? Well, it's fave long shot bias. The bookmakers know that when recreational money comes into this market, very few people are betting £100 to win £16 profit, or betting £100 to win £16.10 profit. More people would rather stick 25 quid on Rublev at 4-1 to win £100 profit than they would to stick £600 on Djokovic to win £100 profit. It's the same liability, it's the same risk profile. If you've got an infinite bankroll, you're still betting a unit win stake bet where you're betting to win £100 on both of them, but few people want to lose £600, and most people could lose 25 quid at 4-1. But few people could lose 600 quid at 1-6. And because more people bet at higher odds and fewer people bet at lower odds, bookmakers maximize their profits by applying more margin to the outsider, to the underdog, to the long shot, than they do to the favourite. In fact, they've applied almost no margin to the favourite here and all the margin to the underdog. So there is fave long shot bias. And if we can be aware of fave long shot bias, we can find these biased markets, and very possibly we can find opportunity to bet on where we think so little margin has been applied, there may be a value bet, which this 1.1666 arguably could be at Bet365. We also have crowd favourite bias over here. So crowd favourite bias is where recreational money is really one-sided because of a crowd favourite. for example, Fallon Sherrick against anybody. Fallon Sherrick could be the favourite in a two-person darts match, but more people will want to bet on her against a man, against a Peter Wright or so on, because they want to see her win. She's a favourite. She's a crowd favourite. They want to see the women win the darts. Similarly here, a 9-dart finish in the Darts Masters 2023. Yes is 2.37, no is 1.53. Now, whilst this is a favourite and an underdog, it's really not that much of an underdog, not that much of a favourite, where arguably in most money lines, most two outcome lines like this, there wouldn't be that much, if any, bias applied to one side over the other. The reason why there may be a lot of margin applied to the yes is because people, recreational bettors, crowd favourite, they want to bet on something to happen. The yes will be so much more popular than the no, because you get to cheer on when it happens. So, because more money may be coming in for the yes, for the crowd favourites, for the Shallon Ferricks, for the 9-darters, for the 147s, then the fact that odds are available for these to happen may be indicative of bias and value on the other side, the no. And this is very similar to action bias, over bias. So here we've got a screenshot of an SSBT. They've got various lines such as 14 to 17 total goals, 18 or more goals, and 13 or less goals. Now, arguably, there is bias here on the overs, because people love betting on things to happen. So it's more typical. It's not all of the time, and certainly we need to price these up ourselves instead of just blindly betting on unders. There was a time many years ago when you could just bet on unders and profit, but you were also highlighted quite quickly as a sharp better. There's an old phrase that if you bet the under points line in NFL, then you are, by proxy, a sharp better, because all recreational players want to bet the over. Similarly here, betting over corners, 64 or more, over goals, 18 or more, 3 or more home wins, 3 or more matches to finish a draw. Typically, on average, these over things to happen bets will be the bets where the margin is applied, and the unders, the 54 or less corners, the 13 or less goals, the 1 or less home team wins, the 1 or less matches to finish a draw. The unders, the less, the fewer, the non-action lines will be where there is less margin applied. It doesn't by proxy mean that it's value. What is very important is that we calculate these things ourselves in-house. It's just an idea of the kind of markets we want to be looking at if we're going to try and find bias. And if we can find bias, then we can find some opportunity to profit in the long term.